All right, 7th Gear fans, we are back. I know this is a little goofy here just because of the way the camera's working, but after a long hiatus here from the 7th Gear show, we are back, and I have got a fantastic show for you tonight. We're going to have guests probably in and out of here throughout the evening, but we're going to, as you saw on the ads that we placed for the week to promote the show, it's going to be predominantly about the Indy 500. The little, hey, Cody, right on, buddy. Glad you're in. We're going to talk about the Indy 500, get into some of that. Lewis, right on. Lewis is on board. Excellent. So, yeah, Lewis from Orlando. See, I told you, I was telling you guys about this. I've already got people waiting to get on the show, but I am so glad to be back. This is going to be a mega show tonight. Tons of people that are not only stalwarts, hey bro, exactly, in the automotive and motorsports industry, but these guys have years and years of experience, race wins, you know, all kinds of experience, more than I'll probably ever forget, but even more than that, Dave Green's watching. Rock on, Dave. Thank you very much for tuning in. But they have probably more stories, and that's probably even more worthwhile. So, just as always, we are back with the support of our good friends at BeNonHuman.com for all your lifestyle and apparel needs. They've been a long-time partner here, the 7th Gear Show, and myself personally, so be sure to check out BeNonHuman.com, as I said, for all of your lifestyle and apparel needs as well. Oh, and my lovely wife has tuned in. Thank you very much, honey. You can also click on the tab that says Kraus Collection, and you can get your own Kraus BeNonHuman swag and order your apparel there. Without further ado, we are Pete Kelnhofer, my old buddy Pete. Hey, rock on, Pete. Long time no see. We are here hosting this show, as you can kind of see behind me. We are not at the global HQ of the 7th Gear Show, high above the greatest spectacle in racing in Indianapolis. We are on location, and my cousin Paul is tuned in. Thank you, Paul. We are here at the Chateau Elan Hotel and Winery in Brazelton, Georgia, just down the road a piece, as they would say, from the infamous Road Atlanta racetrack. And my friend Jim Sable, my old college buddy Jim. Thanks, man. So I've already got some phenomenal guests waiting to be introduced here, minus you, but I'm kidding. So anyway, as I said, I'll flip the camera around here, guys. I'll introduce you to them, and we'll get into the meat of the show here. So as I flip the camera around here, and they're all looking at their phones, which is awesome, I've got my good friend Michael Miller here joining us for the show for a little bit, and you may remember from our Indy 500 preview show last year, Mr. Nipper Alsup. As I said as he was walking out here, it's Bill Alsup reincarnate with a little bit of Steve Chassis thrown in. And then my very good friend Rene Villenueve, and yes, that Villenueve. So you can ask any questions you want. As you guys know from watching the show in previous episodes, chime in with any questions you've got for myself or any of these guys. We got a lot on tap. I guarantee you we will probably go at least until dusk and could probably go all night. So anyway, guys, thanks very much for joining me on the 7th Gear Show tonight. I couldn't thank you guys enough. I know, Rene, it's been a while to get you on the show, so I am particularly excited about that.
Yeah, I'm hungry, though, and the green room had no food in it. I don't know what's going on with this.
Well, I think David Lee Roth may have already gotten away with all the M&Ms, so yeah, the green room has got a little work to do. We got to get to the Cisco folks to take care of it.
Happy to be here.
So thank you guys very much. So, as we know, we got some pretty big racing on tap this weekend. We've got the Monaco Grand Prix, F1 style, so maybe we'll start off with that, and we're going to get into the IndyCar stuff. But I think it's probably fair to say that we're all pretty good fans of the AMG Mercedes F1 team for various reasons. But as we've seen from the start of the season, you've got, you know, Ferrari was out of the gate pretty strong. You've seen the Haas F1 team from America doing some things that I did not expect to see. And then you've got maybe a resurgent McLaren team here with Alonso and the new power plant. So, and Ernie Becker's watching. Right on, Ernie. Glad to have you on the show.
Right on, Ernie.
So,
Hi, Ernie.
Guys, what's your take on the start of the F1 season here as we get into Monaco for probably their Indy 500 of their season?
I think it's super interesting. I like watching them mix it up a little bit. Not knowing what to expect, I think, makes it super exciting for the start of the season. And the racing so far has been pretty intense. So what are my special thoughts? I like to see where it ends up at the end of the year and who develops their car more and who develops the team more as the year progresses. But right now, it's kind of exciting.
So where do you think the teams are at development-wise? Who do you think's got the edge right now?
Wow, that's a great question. As our friends look down on us.
Yeah, we've got hecklers
Their friends
already.
are always looking down on us, aren't they?
We've already got hecklers in the gallery.
I don't know. I mean, I know the development that goes on behind the scenes. There's the live data that goes back to the shops and the headquarters, and they're running simulators all night long, all night Friday night, all night Saturday night to try to develop different setups for the cars throughout the weekend. So it's always interesting to watch from Friday to Sunday what happens with the teams, and then how that progresses throughout the year. I don't know what the answer is, but it's fun to watch.
I gotcha. And Al Longton has tuned in. Al, one of my good buddies from back in my Illinois days at the Audubon Country Club. So, Rene, what's your take on the start of the season and where things are headed F1-wise right now?
I'm not sure I'm going to be as politically correct as Michael Miller over there.
And by the way, guys, you can say whatever you'd like.
Yeah, look, I think Formula One is, to be honest with you, it's no different than it's really ever been. It's just the more things change, the more things stay the same. There's dominant teams that ebb and flow throughout the last 4 or 5 decades of Formula One. Dominant drivers.
And Ellie's tuned in.
All right. Dominant drivers as well. I like that there's a sense of dominance. I think on the downside, I miss when the development came more from the drivers' input. I miss the days when the guys would stay on Monday and test for 3 or 4 days, or go to Barcelona and test for 3 or 4 days. And it was really about the driver's input, and they even had test drivers. They still do, but they had test drivers back then. And to me, it was much more of a team, from a driver, engineer, team manager, more pure. The technology, obviously, you can't stop technology, but the way they decided that they were going to ban testing, what was this, 10 years ago, in order to save money. And yet all they did is exponentially increase the amount of money and the budgets as a whole. So I guess in short what I'm saying is, who knows? The development is development, like Michael said. What goes on from Monday to Thursday in the factories of Formula One world is something that's anybody's guess, and it's as top secret as most of the CIA and DOD stuff we have out there, if not more. But I really miss the on-track development, and may the best man win. May the best manufacturer win, I say.
Awesome. And Al chimed in. He says, awesome stuff. Great show. Great chat. So, and Al, thank you for that. We're going to keep it going. And John Harkenreiter. Hark is tuned in. Thanks, buddy. So, now, Nipper, I mean, what do you think of all this stuff? You and I've kind of had chats, sort of more related to the IndyCar stuff. But, what do you think about all this stuff with the Halo and all the development and the new changes for F1 this year? I mean, what's your take on that? Because it's coming in one way, shape, or form to open wheel racing here at some point soon.
I think so. I mean, from what I've seen,
Chris Carpenter is watching. Thank you, Chris.
The test versions that I've seen on the Indy cars, to me, are more aesthetically pleasing, just more traditional kind of looking. I guess after a few races now, the Formula One cars don't look so weird to me anymore, because you get kind of used to it. I'm actually sort of find it fascinating with the in-car to see now the different foils and shapes and different things they're putting on this to try and gain some type of downforce off of this device.
Well, and I find it, you talked about, Michael, about how, engineers are sending data real time back to the factories and all that other stuff. We had a student a couple of years ago that works for, I believe it was IBM, and he managed all that data transfer. It was mind-blowing to know.
Do you remember some of the numbers? I do. I remember 18,000 data points every tenth of a second.
Yeah, getting transmitted live back to the factory.
I'm not an IT person, so it doesn't, but I understand a little bit, and I know that transferring 60 to 80 terabytes of information every session.
Yes,
one of it
that's
to the factory
that
back in Europe, and then another one to a reserve facility in North America in case it crashes on the way.
Right.
Which is
And that's a
crazy.
Shout out to our good friend Astolfo.
Right.
Astolfo Rene.
A fun guy. Yep.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Isn't that, doesn't Astolfo mean fun guy?
Very well said, because he is, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Holy cow.
So
That's exactly what it is.
Here's my take on the Halo. and there it goes. And so as I was looking around, I realized that this is after a few long days of work here at the AMG Driving Academy. And there was a time way back when, Kevin, when you asked me my opinion about, hey, what should we call the show? And I came up with a name that apparently didn't fly, which was fine. But I look around and I look down over here at Kevin and I look over at Michael, at Nipper, and I decided that this show should actually be renamed Racers in Flip-Flops. And kudos to McLaren for going with the flip-flop sponsor there.
That's right, right at the top of the halo.
Yeah, and then they came out with a commemorative flip-flop.
That's right,
of
they
McLaren.
did.
So, Zach Brown, you're a genius. But
Right.
we knew that.
And Allie says, that Nipper sounds so smart. He is a pretty smart guy. So, one of the things that I find fascinating, and kind of to your point, and Dan Dyniston's watching from Arizona. Thank you, Dan. To your point, Rene, about missing the days of development, and the dominant teams are kind of always going to be the dominant teams, the McLarens, the Ferraris. But what I find interesting is watching, like Haas F1. Certainly they've had some benefit from Ferrari input on their cars this year. But I also find like the name escapes me. The Kingfisher cars.
Force India.
Thank you, Force India. That's another small budget team that's kind of punching above their weight.
It's been a small budget team its whole life. I mean, that started out as the Jordan team, and then I believe it morphed into the Spiker team, and then from the Spiker team it went to Force India. So it's always sort of held that platform.
Right.
And small budget teams have certainly a disadvantage.
Right. Emmerich Robert says, no, we don't need to rename the show the Racers in Flip Flop Show. He's giving me a thumbs down on that. Dan Baum, one of our former participants here, since we've been doing this for a while, all of us together, has said hi to you, Nipper, and he's watching. So, it's easy to call, say, oh, I'm grooving on Ferrari, I'm grooving on Hamilton, or Raikkonen or whoever. Of the smaller teams, these teams that you're pulling for the underdog. What's your take? Who's your favorite, Michael?
I would have to go Haas. I mean, I would have to go Haas. They went through a lot of development.
And who do you like better, Magnussen or Grosjean?
Alexander Rossi. Who should have had the seat? He should have had the seat, right?
I agree. Two thumbs up for Rossi. He won the Indy 500. He's doing pretty well in IndyCar this year. I have to go Grosjean.
Grosjean?
Yeah.
All right. And how about you, Nipper? What's your take? Who's your favorite kind of underdog?
I like that the Sauber, that's an old, team that's been around, similar to Force India, and I like that they are having some good runs this year. And I think that it's interesting. We were talking about
votes for Kevin Magnussen already.
I would think
on the show
he's
here.
Probably a lot more popular with fans. But
Dan Baum says Grosjean's great when he hits the wall under a safety car. So
that was
all right. Well,
everybody's got their talents.
Yeah, Juan Montoya's all about jet dryers. So whatever.
So I think that it is interesting though with the Haas and the Sauber that I think that there's now development through Ferrari instead of just selling them engines. I think they're like trying stuff with those other cars as well, and maybe that'll become more of a trend. Maybe that was even something that was borrowed from here more with some of the IndyCar teams and NASCAR teams and all the shared stuff.
Potentially. I mean, Haas certainly has a lot more tentacles than I think people realize. Our good friend Anthony Pulpolo is watching tonight as well. Hey, Anthony. And so what about you, Rene? What do you think about your faves amongst the underdogs, so to speak?
I go with Team Lotus.
No.
Way back in the day.
Current.
I didn't know we'd go retroactive.
I was going to say, I didn't know we could go.
We go retroactive.
We could go back.
I know, all right.
No,
look, I to be honest with you, I bleed red. I'm a Ferrari fan. I've always been a Ferrari fan. And
how could you not be?
Yeah, I mean, well, there are a lot of people who are anti-Ferrari.
Is that an underdog, though?
It's not an underdog. But it was an underdog for a very, very long time.
Fair enough.
If you were a Ferrari fan, you had some very, very thin years in the 80s where there was hundreds of Grand Prix that they failed to win or even score a podium.
Yeah, they were kind of lost in the wilderness there for a while.
They were lost in the wilderness. There wasn't a lot of technology going on. It should have been their heyday with V10s and V12s. And obviously it took a brilliant driver who brought the team around him and brought that team back to prominence and back to sort of its former glory. So, like I said, things tend to ebb and flow, and I think that today's underdog is tomorrow's top team and vice versa. So I stick with Ferrari.
Well, you know, I got to tell you, and for 7th Gear fans who haven't figured it out yet, yes, I'm down with Ferrari, but I go back a couple of decades earlier to one of probably my all-time favorite driver, who was your uncle Gilles. And I still have compilation videos, particularly of Zandvoort, you know, and the battle that he had and all that. Ryan from Angie's List is on. Hey, Ryan. Al Longton, Rene, wants to know what you think of Lance Stroll.
Wow. How many people are on this?
It's a sticky situation.
Yeah, it is a sticky situation.
No, seriously, guys.
I'll say
this is one thing about the 7th Gear show is we don't hold anything back. So we're going to probably stir up a little more controversy here as well once we get into some of the IndyCar stuff as well. So say whatever you'd like.
You know, Lance, I think, is the quintessential version of what a racer is today. When you decide as a young boy that you want to go racing, you have to do anything and everything in your power to get there. You know, we all have our own stories. I don't believe, between the three of us sitting here, that our fathers had the type of money that Lance's father had. It's not a new story. It's just maybe a little bit more extreme. You know, in the sports car world, we race with a lot of people who got there because they could afford to be there, which is absolutely fine. And there is a point in time where the money level and the talent level tend to blend, and I think that's really what's happening with Lance. A lot of money was spent to get him there. There was and instead of going the route that I think a lot of people thought, where he was really going to fall off the cliff, he's actually risen to the occasion. And I think in another 3-4 years, Lance is going to be a formidable race car driver.
Awesome. And Al Longton says, he corrected me. He goes, that's "Hey there, boy, Stroll."
Yeah.
So that kind of goes into a couple of other things here. So obviously, Formula One's under new ownership. It's got a new TV package. I would imagine you guys have watched at least parts of some of these Grand Prix this year. So, Michael, what's your take on the new TV package at the very least?
Can I be honest?
That's what we're here for.
I have not watched a race from beginning to end since the year began. So I watched the start. I watched the end.
Is that have anything to do with the new TV package?
You know what? It doesn't. I've tried. Okay. It's okay. But I'm probably not the best guy to comment on the new TV package because I simply don't have the time to watch the entire race in its entirety. So.
Gotcha. Hey, Donna. Donna McManus is now tuned in. She's watching as well. How you doing, Donna? What about you, Nip?
I like it. I think that it's as much as I think David Hobbs and Steve Matchett are, you know, really interesting guys. I just, for whatever reason, and maybe yeah, you know, maybe the way it comes over with less commercials or whatever, it seems to be.
Again, we're looking
more hecklers.
Being looked down on by our friends.
We're the objects of someone's heckling, apparently.
It's good. Martin Brundle, right? Does some, you know, and I find him interesting and relevant. So.
Yeah, my cousin Chris has chimed in and said he's not a fan of Sky TV. My buddy Eric Powell, that we used to race together with, he and I in World Challenge, is tuned in. What's your take on that TV package, Rene?
I'm sort of with Michael in that I haven't really had the time to watch it. And you know, in the old days when Formula One was on ESPN back in the 80s, it was the only way to get it. This is the way they did it. They literally just gave us and it was probably BBC or something at the time, because the terrestrial TV rights changes, you know, about every 4 or 5 years over there. But everyone wanted to tune in and listen to Murray Walker. Everyone wanted, and James Hunt back in the day before his passing, rest in peace. I think that we got really used to the TV package that we had with NBC Sports Network, and I think Matchett and Lee Diffie, of course, and occasionally Bob Varsha, and of course David Hobbs, our very good friend. They do a fantastic job. Does it make it better or worse? I think it's obviously personal preference. I mean,
so do you think it's just a matter, as you kind of alluded to, that it's just something that we got used to and comfortable with? That it's like just that whole idea of change is something that we're just, it's going to take us a while to wrap our heads around?
Human nature is not to like change, so that could be just getting used to what's new and fresh on the scene. But going back to the days of ESPN, when it was the raw footage, the raw coverage, hey, turn the sounds down and listen to the opening lap, and they don't talk for the first 30 seconds.
Turn the volume up.
Turn the volume up. I mean, I have the goosebumps just thinking about that. That was electrifying stuff, and it was simple. And maybe what didn't have the cinematography, for lack of a better term, but I really appreciate that simplicity.
Gotcha. And Cherie Caban is from Orlando. She's tuned in and watching. My wife says James Hunt was awesome. Yes, he was. And my buddy Bob Beisel from Indianapolis. Bob, how's things at the Speedway today? He's working out there. So, and we've got all kinds of stuff swirling around.
There's a lot going on backstage.
There is much going on backstage.
There's a lot going on backstage. We've got somebody over here in the wings looking at us over here, like we're plumb blokes that just don't know what we're doing.
So, folks, if you look over here, you'll see. That's right, we got him. Our dear friend, Mr. Reinhold Reinger, the global chief instructor for the AMG Mercedes Driving Academy, as well as a 3 out of 4 time winner already this year in the Asian GT Series.
And as you can see, very fit.
He is very fit, although he would be more fit if he was wearing his 7th Gear shirt, but that's okay. We won't hold that against him tonight.
It doesn't wick away the sweat like that one does.
Maybe that's the reason. Yeah. I know everybody.
It's done wonders for me though. Mine helps me. I'm actually a lot heavier than this in person. Anyway,
it's slimming.
It's a very slimming shirt.
Yes.
Correct. So Reinhold, since you're here and we're talking about your success this year. Yeah, right. My buddy Al Longton from Illinois apparently knows of you. He says you rock that GT series.
Really?
So my friend Al Longton from Illinois, longtime friend, is aware of you, and our buddy Don Kutchel has now tuned in.
Oh, great.
So Reinhold, tell us a little bit about your season thus far in the Asian GT series.
The Asian GT series, actually Asian GT, the proper GT Asian is since 4 years there, and the motorsports in Asia getting more and more popular. In Japan is a traditional sport, but in countries like Thailand, like Malaysia, like China and so on, it's pretty new. And till last year they run just the GT3 cars, and now from this year, last year they run also the GT4 already, but this year the AMG GT4 is new in the series. And we decide to start over there and having fun a little bit with the GT4 cars. I expected actually just so in the middle field because of my age and so on. And there are strong competitors there actually.
He's a bronze.
But luckily, old and bronze. Luckily it's pretty good right now, surprisingly. I don't know.
That's awesome. And so one of our students that has worked with us wants to know, Reinhold, if you still have the iPhone case that he gave you, because he still has the cap that you gave him.
Of course.
Of course, exactly.
AMG Driving Academy.
And just as we're talking with Reinhold, we've got a couple more guests that have shown up. The lovely Miss Shea Holbrook Chorley, a dear friend of mine, and she and I had raced
together. Are you doing
together.
the Blake Shelton? Do you know what this is?
No.
Oh, we gotta show him the Blake Shelton.
Oh yeah.
Why are you invoking such pop culturisms right now?
I don't know.
So we've got her joining the show tonight, and we're going to get to her in just a moment. But then we've also got, I've got to actually do it this way. Another good friend of mine, Mr. Todd Snyder, joining the show.
Thank you.
Hey, how you doing, Todd? Thank you very much for coming on tonight. Al Reinhold, my friend Al, wants to know the horsepower and weight in your GT cars.
Difficult. So actually, with the balance of performance, we have in the GT3 car in the Pro Series, around 540 horsepower. The weight is 1,280 kilos, so I just know it in kilos. Sorry about it.
So Al, you're going to have to do the conversion. Google it.
And in the GT4, actually, the GT4 MG is a pretty cool car, pretty fast, and they stringed us down to 400 horsepower, 398, something like this, and super heavy, 1,480 kilos. So it's pretty heavy, it's pretty less horsepower, and still super competitive. So.
All right, 7th Gear fans, if you need to, I will post a conversion chart on the webpage when we're done with the show.
Could it be 3,200 pounds?
Sorry?
3,200, could it be?
Yeah, about.
Something
you said 1,400.
3,2, 3,1.
Kilos?
A lot of drinks.
Don't worry, guys. We'll translate this all to English later.
That's right.
Thank
so,
you. Okay. Pleasure.
You don't realize it's got subtitles.
They're
When
looking
you're
at
every
me
time
like,
you're talking, there's
has it not
subtitles.
been
Don't
funny?
worry.
In
Too?
Chinese?
Yeah,
or-
Chinese. Yeah.
Todd, can you see this? Al Longton says, Todd Snyder was my best Skippy instructor ever.
Holy mackerel. Isn't that great?
Missy says, hi, Shea. She's on.
Hi, Missy.
Emmerich says 3256 is the conversion from kilos. So we've already
All right, Emmerich.
see,
There we go.
this
We
is
have our staff on it.
this is the kind
That's
of
what I
reach the
thought.
7th Gear show has. There's people out there somewhere operating on brains right now.
On the top.
Maybe they have them to begin with. Yeah.
All right, so Shea, we started the show talking about Formula One and the TV package and all that. It all started off with, did you follow Formula One much since you're in I'm sorry, because you're
Just now.
running in the
Really?
Lamborghini Super Trofeo series this year, excuse me.
Lamborghini
Todd's
used to have
behind
a
the
Formula
camera
One too.
going.
I know, see, this is the
Although it's
beauty.
Todd's
This is the
series.
beauty of Facebook Live right here. Is we can get away with all kinds of stuff. So do you watch any Formula One at all?
I do follow it occasionally. Primarily, actually, Michael Miller and I, back like 6 years ago when Mike was coaching me, still coaching me, still trying to get me fast, still trying to
Already
get me
fast.
to the dream of F1. No, the dream's not F1. I'm not good enough for F1. But when we started working together, it was actually when I started paying a little bit more attention to F1 because he's like, who's your favorite driver? And that's when I just got turned on. I was like, you know what, that Kimi Räikkönen guy is pretty cool. I like his, he's so different. His personality is so different than mine, and maybe even probably, yeah, his driving
Like
style.
Bottas, huh?
I love
But
Räikkönen's press conferences the best.
Absolutely the best.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
well, you know,
very
Mika
opposite.
Hakkinen started that whole thing.
And I was a Mika fan.
Yeah.
I was a
Right.
huge Mika fan.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess maybe because my upbringing wasn't in motorsports and I didn't watch motor racing. When I got involved with zero knowledge and just kind of had to learn along the way and was really thrown into the deep end. I didn't really become a motorsport fan until I introduced even myself into the sport. So it took me a while to even become a motorsport fan of F1 and NASCAR and IndyCar and rally racing. So no, just really in the past 10 years since
Didn't
I
we have
started.
an acronym, WWKD? What would Kimi do?
What would Kimi
do?
do? Whenever I was driving like a total Billy, that's what you would say to me over the radio.
What would Kimi do?
What would Kimi do?
Okay, good talk, Shea. We're gonna move on. We'll come back to you.
I don't know what she said, to be honest with you. Was she talking about you this whole time? I don't know. Who are you talking about?
Good talk.
He
Russ.
said Botas, and I'm thinking, Botas is coaching you and telling you drive like
Right.
Kimi? Where did this come from?
Zofia Mack is watching. Zofia, thank you for tuning in. Al Longton, God, he knows all you guys. He says a very young Miller gave me awesome tips in Las Vegas to get me an old road course win in Skippy.
There you go.
Damn, we are old. We are, although I guess I should feel better about the fact that Al's older than us. So, all right. So the question comes to you, Todd, about Formula One. What's your take on? Yeah, exactly. Now that you can all kind of return the favor. What's your take on who's got the edge right now, team-wise? Obviously, Ferrari got out of the gate quick, and AMG Mercedes is kind of caught up here. You got a couple of upstarts, punching above their weight, like Force Indy and Haas and a couple of those guys. So, what do you think of all that?
Definitely, the Ferrari's got a good package, and it certainly is the one to beat right now. Mercedes is coming back pretty strong with that, so it's probably going to come down to those two teams for the championship. But yeah, you got Force India and some of the other ones that are doing quite well. the Williams not doing quite as good. So I'm surprised that the Ferrari car seems to be favoring, not favoring Vettel so much as favoring the other guy whose name's escaping me.
Kimi Räikkönen.
Thank you.
Kimi Räikkönen.
We were talking about.
We were talking about Mikel Räikkönen. Right, so Mikel Räikkönen. Yeah.
So I too am a big fan. So I look forward to him doing well as well.
Okay, so I think it's pretty well accepted that, you know, certainly the big two are Ferrari and AMG Mercedes, but what about the Red Bull guys? What about Verstappen? Verstappen seems like he's sort of potentially could be the enigma, the lightning in the bottle if you can catch it. So, Michael, let's put that one to you. What do you think's going on with Verstappen right now?
I can't profess to know what's going on with Verstappen, but I can profess to know that he's exciting to watch. He's aggressive. He does stuff that not all drivers do. He takes some chances, and it reminds me of maybe a young Kimi, or even when Juan Pablo went in there with challenging Mikel and so forth. It's pretty fun.
By the way, you're supposed to just pretend that you watch it all.
I don't watch
For
it
the
all.
sake of the show, just pretend for
What
the
about,
show.
what
Right,
about
just-
double
just-
moves?
Just work.
Oh,
with
I
me.
didn't see that. I don't know.
Oh, yeah,
I'll be straight honest. I didn't see that.
See, Hark, I knew you were going to ask that question. That's why I brought up the Red Bull stuff with Ricciardo and Verstappen. What do you think, Nip?
I think that what's interesting to me is how the sport has changed in the last 30 years, and with the introduction of technology and
Al, you're killing me.
simulators, you can get the cars really close on setup, the way you can measure that and get them to drive very similar. You can do the simulator work. So the culture 30 years ago, you had to make some friends that went faster than you, and they would give you little tidbits of information, and you earned respect, and the more respect you had from the older guys, they would give you more and more, and you would amass your own knowledge base and become fast and good. Now the learning curve is so much faster because of all the tools that the modern driver has.
The technology gives
But
it
they
all
don't
to
really
you,
have
right?
To make friends.
Right.
You know, they can just go and try.
It's
And
It's
try,
sort
you
of a
know,
microcosm of the younger generation.
You
Am I
said-
wrong? Am I wrong? I mean, we don't have to make friends because we have so much technology giving us information. I mean, I think it's, to your point, it's great in a sense. But I sort of like the old way where you had to earn it. I'm not saying you guys don't earn it, but you had to earn it. You had to make friends. You had to meet Reinhold Reinger and have him understand and respect what you do for him to pass along that information. He gets paid to give us the information here, but you know, if you were racing against him, he wouldn't give you anything. Can we swear on this, by the way?
Yeah.
No, he wouldn't give you shit. No.
Right,
I'm
right,
sure.
right.
That's right.
Yeah.
I definitely give you informations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right or wrong information?
That's just right. It's up to you. You have to figure out exactly if
There'd
it
be an
is.
exchange. But
Trial and error.
yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's like the old saying that, you know, when Al Unger Jr., who we were just talking about earlier tonight, he used to say, you know, my dad taught me everything I know, but he didn't teach me everything he knows. Right? Al Longton's killing me. He goes, who's stopping first? Verstappen. And so we'll circle back onto the whole Red Bull Verstappen question, but Allie has come up with a question. She wants to know, if y'all could race against any F1 driver, who would you choose? And since we were right here with you, Nipper and Rene, why don't you guys answer that one first?
Of all time, right?
She just said
Mike-
any F1 driver. Didn't say current or past or anything.
Right. So Michael Schumacher, I had the luck of meeting him one time. He just happenstance riding his Harley Davidson through my little hometown of Silverton, Colorado.
Something he loved to do. Come here
Right,
and be
exactly.
completely
Between
invisible.
that year, it would have been, say, 2005-ish, 6. He raced in Canada, flew after the Montreal Grand Prix to Durango, Colorado, got on Harley Davidsons and rode him up to Silverton that night, and was eating at the local restaurant. And I had a friend that just happened to recognize him, called me, and anyway, blah blah. But
I like the stories. Keep going with the stories.
So,
They're good.
really a nice guy, and we talked about riding motorcycles and the area, and it was really cool. I was like dumbfounded and just kept showing him the goosebumps on my arms, and it was cool. So that would be my pick.
Gotcha. How about for you, Rene?
you're asking almost the impossible in terms of narrowing it down to one. There were so many brilliant guys who, by the way, would have smoked me no matter what. But I mean, I guess the number one really has to come down to Gilles. I mean, he was the consummate fastest lap every single lap. Be damned the consequences.
Yes.
And it's hard to compete with that on any level. So I would have liked to just watch his dust and breathe a little bit of the exhaust fumes as he completely blew me away.
Awesome. And our dear friend, Mr. Ron Feeney, is watching us now. Hey,
Hi,
Ron.
Missing you.
Hope you're doing well, buddy. Nice to see that you're joining us for the show. Thank you very much. So, Todd, how about you? Same question to you. If you could pick any F1 driver to race against, who would it be?
I'm going to switch it a little bit. I'm going to go more to an era versus...
Oh, I love this already.
All right. I mean, so they've always compared Senna to Schumacher, etc., Jim Clark. That's the era I would like to go back to. I'd like to race back in the 60s, 70s where men were men and it was real.
Clark,
and
Hill,
really
all those guys.
All of that. Even into the early 70s.
Jock and Rindt, maybe.
Gilles, Lauda,
François Sever.
Sever, yeah.
I mean, that was a very difficult time.
The
difficult
Gorilla.
cars. The cars were exceeding the track's capabilities. Yeah, there was a lot of deaths, etc., which is bad. But I mean, that was the era where you had to go, and
you had to have some stones,
there were some
man.
Serious consequences.
Yeah, you had to be full of commitment. That's
not
for
that
sure.
there's not now, but the safety obviously has increased
Well, that's.
dramatically as far as.
Oh, AJ's watching. AJ, where are you? You're supposed to be here. Not that there's not
He's
consequences.
he's delayed.
But that's a whole other show about talking about how they've kind of dumbed down tracks over the years. I get it. Yeah, AJ sends us an emoji where he's flexing his muscles. All right, so back over here, Shea. Who would you like to race against if you had your choice of any? Okay, let's give us another answer or elaborate on that one. Otherwise, I'm going to have to take the camera away from you.
I'll elaborate primarily because I liked the fact that, in my opinion, I thought that his driving immediately had an attitude. Like
Who's his?
Kimi.
Okay.
I think that Kimi always does, and still currently does have this kind of aura about him that a lot of people probably don't. Maybe people don't like, and because he's so different than maybe myself, I think that there's something to be learned there. And because of how he's been able to come out of the gates, like we worked so long on qualifying, and that guy for me was somebody that, as it sounds like many of us, for me in particular, Kimi was somebody that was able to attack under any kind of pressure. And I think that he also, his risk reward at times wasn't balanced, and the times that he risked too much for not probably maybe a little bit of a reward and maybe spun the car, was still able to get back and podium, if not win a race. And I really loved watching that type of drive. That's the reason why I really liked
what
it.
I find really interesting about Raikkonen is it wasn't that long ago when they were questioning whether or not he was going to have a seat the following year in Ferrari. They were questioning if he still had it. And I think that question's pretty well been answered. As has the where is AJ Alsup question. He is doing laundry, bro. That's what he said. And my next door neighbor back in Indianapolis, Dave Hornack's
you can
watching.
hang it on your door.
I'd rather just call him out. I mean, we got everybody from a laundromat to Florida to Illinois and California watching tonight, so we're in good shape. Dave, glad you joined us, man. Thank you. Excellent answer, Shea. Thank you for elaborating on that a little bit more as to why. All right, Reinhold, you can't say yourself, so who would you like to race against?
In the Formula One.
Formula One.
Any Formula One driver.
Any Formula One driver, any era. Let's open it up to any Formula One driver, any era.
So many really cool guys during the last years in the Formula One. It's really difficult to say. So there are definitely characters there.
Oh yeah.
Right now, I really like, honestly, Lewis Hamilton. Even when his image is maybe not everybody's darling or so, but for me, he's a really cool guy, really aggressive driver, unbelievable talented, this guy. Always fast, always fighting. Even in the last race in Abu Dhabi against Nico Rosberg, when Nico Rosberg won, maybe it was not nice what he did, but shows off how what kind of racer he is. He never give up, even when it's impossible to win. And basically, I like this. So he's pretty good.
Awesome. My cousin Chris Carpenter seems to think he'd like to race against Vettel. James Legg, who was with us today, and James, you tuned in a little bit late because we actually started talking about this and we had a question come in. He wants to know what everybody's thoughts are on Max Verstappen. So we'll come back to that and finish that discussion here in a second, but we got to get Michael's take on Formula One drivers. Yeah, I didn't forget about you. You're not off the hook.
Finally, there's history involved. I had a lot of time to think about it. The first thought, I thought John Alesi, I thought Senna, I thought Mika, I thought James Hunt for obvious reasons. And I'm like, but would I be racing against them? Like, I say Senna because Senna's an obvious go-to move, but as Rene pointed out, I'd be watching it from a distance. So I like Todd's answer with era. The era of risk, reward, more risk. I like that era quite a lot. So if you go to an era, it would go back a couple days. I'm going James Hunt, potentially, just for after he beat me, we could bro out and see what happens after that. That'd be a lot of fun.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Gilles Villeneuve, I would love to be there just for the show. Just for the show. So if push comes to shove, I really love the 90s era, I'm going John Alesi.
Yeah.
Oh, dude,
John
that was
Alesi.
at the top of my mind, too, Alesi.
I'm going John Alesi.
Well, and not to mention best-looking cars ever.
Oh,
yeah.
Best-sounding cars ever.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they were cool.
Yeah, and I think back, that era of Alesi, and I think about the Leighton House March cars. Those were such badass looking cars. Love those cars. And because I was thinking Alesi as we were kind of going around the table here talking about answers, but and you got me thinking, Todd, about era and history and all that other stuff. And just to throw my 2 cents worth in there, to your point, Michael, it's easy to say Villeneuve, and I absolutely, probably hands down, that's my number one choice. But then there's the Alesis and the Sennas. But I'm going to go back even further. I'm going to go all the way back to Juan Fangio. 5-time world champion, if I remember correctly, back in an era when the tires were like the size of bicycle tires, basically, and they were completely overpowered cars, and you really had to be a man's man to drive those things, and everything else that went with that didn't include anything to do with driving a race car. But that was kind of an era where pretty heady stuff.
Pride of Buenos Aires.
Can I change? No.
I can't change. I've already answered. I was thinking Sterling Moss.
Yeah.
That would be.
That's another
That's
great
another
answer.
one.
I would
Look,
love
you
to
could go
race
on and on.
against
Jimmy Clark was hands down one of the smoothest, best Formula One drivers ever. I mean, it's almost an impossible question to ask. I think uniformly
There's so many,
we can all agree that there's this. If you could go to fantasy camp in heaven with these guys, what a wonderful eternity it would be, because it's you can't pick just one, even though you might have an emotional connection to one or another. I mean, I met Senna. It was the only person I've ever met where I stumbled over my words. I didn't know what to do. I was standing there with him, and I was like, "Can you take a picture?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I took a picture of him. I didn't stand in the picture with him.
You just took a picture of him.
I was that overwhelmed.
Right. The uncomfortable moment had to end quickly.
So that's how. Look, they're all tremendous, and everybody here is incredibly talented in our own way. But we didn't get to Formula One, which is okay. They did, and here's my point of view: you can't talk smack about anybody that drives a Formula One car. Period. End of story. I don't care how they got there, how much money they spent, how many times they crash. You can't talk smack about anybody that can drive at that level, period.
Correct. Well said.
Great example.
Well said. Yeah. And so Lewis says his favorite would be James Hunt to race against. And my buddy Michael, that I used to work with back up in Milwaukee, is tuned in. Michael, thank you very much. So here's part 2 of the question that's impossible to answer. They want to know what F1 track would you like to race at the most and why?
All right.
So Todd, let's start with you, and we'll head back the other way.
Current Spa,
Yes.
old Nürburgring.
Okay.
That's it.
All right.
And why?
Well, I mean, the old Nürburgring.
This is live TV, Todd. Tell them why.
Yeah. Tell
Yeah,
me why.
come on.
Oh, you're supposed to tell me why. Well, Spa, I've got a chance to go to Spa. I didn't get a chance to race on it, but it's just a phenomenal track. The way it is set up, the elevation, the corners, everything. Nürburgring, and again, I'm talking Nordschleife, the old Nürburgring.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the mother of all tracks.
For sure.
It's got every kind of combination you could ever experience.
Hey, Tabernac!
Downhill, etc.
Okay, we're gonna have to lock this guy out. Thomas Merrill's watching,
Hey, Thomas.
Hi, Thomas.
and we have another guest on his way that will be immediately recognizable.
So, yeah, those are kind of my two tracks that are at the top of the list.
Top
at
of the
least
list.
Globally.
Yeah,
And,
sure.
You know, you can narrow it down to
The
other
Nürburgring, to your point, it's sort of the be-all, end-all.
It's the be-all.
And when they used to race there, the dramatics were insane.
God, yeah.
How about you, Rene?
Well, I'm going to disagree with Todd. Kidding. But so I'm gonna expand on you. So current, two tracks I'd like to race on currently. Spa, of course, which I think is kind of everybody's favorite. Hey, the family's here.
Hey,
And Monza, and then my throwback is Old Monza with the banking.
I was thinking Old Monza.
You know,
with the
right,
banking.
Old Monza.
Yeah,
That
the
would
old
be
Monza banking.
Yeah.
I'm
Having
right.
run a lot of Rovals,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Daytona,
good ones.
Homestead. I've run a bunch of Rovals and sports cars. That would be
Yeah.
like the consummate Roval.
Yeah. And what kind of car, though? Would it be that period correct
Yeah,
car?
sure, absolutely.
Like
Yeah.
driving an old Surtees
Yeah,
or something,
yeah.
right? All right.
Why, are you out of wine?
AJ, I mean, Nipper,
Okay.
how about you?
I think it would be, in the past era, it would have been really neat to see Watkins Glen. I was a kid one year, I think my dad raced a support race, but having been there to without the inner loop to into turn 5 and all of that would have been cool for me. I think that both these guys had good answers before, so it's tough going third. It'd be tougher for you.
So Lewis, you're asking Old Monza with what car? I think we were all kind of in agreement that it would be sort of that 60s era Formula One car. Yep, I figured it out, Lewis. You meant Monza, not whatever it was you said before that. All right, Michael, you?
Yes. That Monza kind of blew. That was.
I know,
a good
that was
call.
Sorry,
Man,
I pulled that
That's
one
like
from
a
the
dream
bowels.
car.
So
Yeah.
winning a Ferrari at Monza,
yeah.
right?
Not
That
just
would be
creative,
the
but a
day.
good call. My first two thoughts were what Todd said, was Spa and Nürburgring. But if I had to go something different, if you look at the footage of Mosport, I've been fortunate enough to race there in modern technology, but I can't imagine old technology with no runoff in 1 and 2. So Mosport would be really exciting. But since I've already been there, I was going to go Spa and Nürburgring.
Well, how about Old Spa without the runoff or Armco? I mean, when you talk about eras, right?
So-
when the trees were, hey, I just apexed that tree bark right there.
So if I had it my way, just throwing that on a curve, if I had it my way, it'd be Old Spa and a 90s F1 car.
Ooh.
Spa and a
You do
90s
live
F1
life on the
car.
edge, don't you?
Oh,
All right.
wow.
All right.
All right, and let's get Shea's answer. There's Shea.
Why don't you come sit down with us?
There's Shea's glass
Well,
of wine
they
and phone.
they took what I was gonna say. I mean, ultimately, like Nürburgring is a track that I have not been to that I think would be absolutely fantastic. It's something that's got to be a bucket list item at one point in my life or another. But then I was gonna say Mosport, because Mosport I've been fortunate to be fast there, but I've also been unfortunate to have wrecked cars there. I know what it's like to, at least in a touring car alone, be quick, but also ball some stuff up. And I can't imagine what it would have been like, especially back in the era when Formula One was there. Hey.
So, you know what? It just...
Someone talk about old? I mean, back in the
Oh,
era?
yeah. Yeah. And Seventh Gear fans, I purposely turned this way because I don't want to take away from the answers that we got going on right now, but we have another very special guest that just joined us. My buddy Brandon Haygood is tuned in. Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate that. But, one track that I was thinking of as we were kind of going around the table here as to tracks is, what about Monte Carlo?
Of course. Yeah.
Right? How could we forget Monte Carlo? I mean, and maybe in like that early, mid-'70s era Formula One car?
I can forget it because I'm not very good in slow corners.
Well, it's funny because you mentioned Mosport, and I was thinking, you like, yeah, because you're not.
All right, so Seventh Gear fans, we've got another guest panelist, if you will, on the Seventh Gear show tonight.
A Lemons racer.
He's a Lemons racer.
Well-known Lemons racer.
He's not particularly well known, but he's carved a little bit of time out of his busy Lemons schedule to be with us tonight. It is one Mr. Tommy Kendall, the man, TK. TK, yeah.
Applause track. Thank you.
That's right.
We have a laugh track as well. Right
Tommy,
over there.
thanks so much for joining us on the 7th Gear Show tonight. Love the shirt. Love that you were able to take a little time to join us tonight. You kind of got the sense we're talking a little Formula One since it's Monte Carlo this weekend, and we had a few people that have been watching chiming in asking questions about who's our favorite Formula One driver that we'd want to race against, who's our favorite Formula One driver, what tracks we want to drive at. So since we're on that topic, let's throw it your way. So what Formula One driver in any era would you like to race against?
Oh, boy.
Track and why? Let's start there.
The one I shouldn't say this. The one I most want to race against is Eddie Cheever because I want to win.
I thought
Hold
to
on.
say that.
Hold on.
Can I say that?
I don't want to race against Ayrton Senna, probably.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. And track?
Boy, I mean, Monaco. The race you want to win is Monaco. Now
Sure.
the track I want to drive, Spa. I think one thing. I don't think the track is my favorite, but I love the post race to be. I'm not sure there's a better podium. Le Mans and Monza.
Yeah.
Are the two greatest podiums I think in racing with the sea of people. I remember my friend, the late great Jeff Krosnoff, went to Monza, being a Ferrari Tifosi from way back before he drove, and he said when the race is over, he says I just found a little nook to recede into so that I didn't get caught in the current, and I've got a lot of favorites. From my first F1 idol was KK Rosberg for sure.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice,
he
good
just had
call.
a flair. And it's funny what you don't realize about he was world champion, but I think he has 5 total wins in his career.
That's right. Yeah.
So we just had this flair, and I actually got to meet KK. It's kind of a funny story because I was going to the DTM race, ITC race in Helsinki. Robert Lapalainen, that used to race Trans Am, was the promoter of that event. Invited me over. I was good friends with Paul Newman. I told him I was going. He says, "Oh, I will call KK for you." And so when you get there, go see him. I spent 3 days at the race, and I was too intimidated to go introduce myself to KK because I didn't want to be disappointed. I had him on this huge pedestal, and so I went by Friday and looked in at his thing and never said anything. Saturday, and then finally Sunday, I went and introduced myself, and he could not have been warmer. Invited me in, went to dinner with him that night, joined them for dinner afterwards. JJ Leto and those guys.
Oh, wow.
And the tie-in was that KK drove for Newman's Can-Am team before he was an F1.
Gotcha.
So it was a cool era.
Absolutely. And Rene Villenueve's better half, Liz, is tuned in and she's watching. So hi, Liz. Thank you very much.
Hello,
Jason
Liz.
Wallace is watching. Casey Hay is tuned in. So we've got a lot going on.
Is this the
here.
biggest audience ever for the 7th Gear / Racers and Flip Flop show?
Actually, thus far it's not. But once we start looking at the analytics, you never know.
I know I'm wearing them too.
Hey.
So, and that's fantastic stuff. And we were actually, it's kind of funny because this is a long way from the original question here. And let's get back to it because we've had, now we're talking. Now we're talking. We got to look at that.
Me? No.
Yeah.
7th Gear Show. So we had started this discussion when the questions started coming in about your take, our collective take, our individual take on the whole Josh Verstappen, Max Verstappen's his son, and Danny Ricciardo at Red Bull, knowing that Ferrari and AMG Mercedes are kind of the 1-2, but then you got Red Bull knocking on the door. What do you think is going on with Max Verstappen?
I mean, he's still incredibly young, and you can give him advice, but you can kind of see it just running right off like overwatering a plant. It's just like he doesn't really. I don't think he's that. And most of us when we were young didn't want. Some of us didn't want to listen. He's like, listen, I'm going for it. Anything that is against that advice, I don't want to hear it. I mean, he's kind of just they can run it how they want. I think they're going to continue to probably have some problems unless they, jerk the chain a little bit. It's a delicate situation when you've got two. You want 2 strong drivers. Some teams choose to go with a number 1, number 2, and it's easier within the team. but 2 strong number ones moves the team forward. So, I mean, I think it's good for the sport. I'm kind of glad that he has that sort of young impetuousness. And it's frustrating on times. You're like, you want to shake him when you think you know better. But I think ultimately, it's if everyone was the same and everybody always made good decisions, it wouldn't be.
In a sense, it almost seems like it's a similar situation, yet on a different scale as Force India with Ocon and Garcia.
Yes and no. I don't know. That's a little they're pretty much equals there, you know.
But they still seem to not really listen all that well and have to have that chain pull to get them.
Yeah,
you know,
I'm not sure anyone is a strong hand running that. So, and I think you've got different personalities there. I guess it's similar. You know, Perez just doesn't seem to, doesn't seem to care.
Right.
Kevin, are you sponsored by Force India on this show? Because that's like the 3rd time you brought that.
It's actually only
up.
the second team. It's only the second time.
I was just wondering.
We're getting flash from the upper deck here at the Chateau.
Yes, we are. Al Longton, great show. Emmerich Robert, show with the biggest stars. That's what we do here at the 7th Gear Show. All we do is win, baby. So that's the pull we've got here.
Look who's back.
I know, and look what he's sporting.
My new sponsor.
Freaking awesome 7th Gear Show. I think
At least for the next 30 minutes, and then we're gonna get the shirt back.
That's right. I think we're gonna have to figure out how to put that on that Asian GT car. So, all right, let's kind of switch gears here a little bit, because we've got probably the biggest race in the world coming up this weekend at the greatest, known as the greatest spectacle in racing, at the greatest race course in the world, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. There's a lot of ground to cover on this particular topic. Obviously, we're going to talk about the bumping and the fact that we've got a big name like James Hinchcliffe not in the race, and the possibilities of them expanding the field and why the bumping in 33, 35. What are we going to do? But also a shout out to our good friend Pippa Mann, who we work with regularly, who went through a gut wrenching bump day to unfortunately not make the field, and I know she's got it, and we are for her. There's
We're flying in this empty chair. This is the missing man formation.
That's exactly right. Thank you, Tommy. This is in honor of Pippa, the missing man formation chair. Sorry you can't be here, Pippa, but we're thinking about you. And Bob from Angie's List is watching. Very good. What? Al wants to know how many marriages does it take to get an IndyCar ride? I don't even know exactly what that means, Al, so I'm just going to let you clarify that, and we'll just continue to move on.
Let's hope that was autocorrect.
Yeah, I'm going to go with that.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with that.
Bad autocorrect. Exactly.
I don't know, but let me know.
Back in the day, you needed at least 2 to 3 marriages to win based on the answers.
And
Right.
the answers, and there was somebody else that was. Was it Emerson? Emerson was he twice with Teresa, and then
he won on number 2.
Yes, he won on number 2. Yeah.
True story.
So, all right. So we know Hinch. Obviously, he's 5th in points. Didn't qualify. Admitted, it was a team mistake. They just, they win as a team, they lose as a team. Good on him for taking the high road. But the whole notion of them buying out a ride.
Eva Perón on the balcony.
What do we got here?
Beautiful.
What do we got going on up here?
It's like Good Morning America, and you're one of those people with the sign standing on the corner.
That's right.
From Brazelton, Georgia.
As you can see, we've got quite a bit of interaction going on tonight's show.
Strong opinion on that, because I said.
So we know that Hinchcliffe has got a strong relationship with Honda. Honda really wants him in the race. He's doing all these commercials. Arrow's got a lot invested. His primary sponsor, like I said, he's 5th in points. At what point do you buy out a ride? Like the rumored ride was going to be Jay Howard, who is kind of a satellite team to that program. And at what point do you just take your lumps and leave it the way it is? Nip, what do you think?
Well, it's not unprecedented, right? The Penske cars sat out 1 year.
Reinhold didn't make it 1 year, right? But he bought a car from Penske.
But they didn't buy anybody out.
No,
Yeah,
they
so
didn't.
I
They
wanted
took
to
their
talk about the
lumps,
morality of it instead of the choice.
Well, it breaks tradition. I mean, it really isn't sort of unprecedented to do that. You make this. And there was one a couple of days ago adding
Is
some
that the
cars to
margaritas
the
that you
field.
ordered? It's a margarita machine. Thank you.
It's you feel bad. I feel for Pippa. I went through it with our own family. My dad was a good IndyCar driver. He was second in the national championship in '81, but only made the Indy 500 once of 5 attempts.
Right.
And so, you know, he'd stand on the time and somebody'd bump him, or he'd wave off and it'd rain. And it was just, there's a certain element to that race and trying to make the field that there's always that possibility, and I think that's part of what makes it what it is.
Gotcha. So, all right, so Shea, you've got maybe a little bit of a different perspective on this. Obviously, you know, you and Pip have driven together, you're friends, but that's really not what my question to you is going to be. With the topic on deck right now, as a businesswoman, as a team owner, and having been through kind of both sides of the coin from behind the wheel to behind the checkbook, what's your take on this whole thing about, you know, buying out a ride or, you know, living with it, or, you know, what's your thought on that?
Well, I mean, I think it's really tough, right? So just a little background on like people that don't, like, I've met James, and I know James through people, so I feel like I know him vicariously, and then I directly know Pippa very well. One thing, and I'll speak on what I know. What I do know is Pippa is one of the most hardworking people in the industry I've ever met in my life, both on the business and the driving end. And I think that to set like 2 precedents, the first precedent on the driving side, you take somebody that came from a lot of experience, took a leap of faith and came to the U.S. because she wanted to pursue the open wheel side of things on the U.S. I can't speak on how women are viewed overseas in Europe versus here. I don't really know. I don't even really care. But I think she came for opportunity, and I think that because she isn't in an IndyCar all the time, I mean, if you think about the entire field, she has the least amount of drive time over the course of the season than any other driver in the field. So the fact that she has the ability to even go wheel in IndyCar, I mean, I don't know if I can do that. I mean, I'm not an open wheel driver. Like, I don't know.
Most
if
of
I
us
can
could
go,
probably say that.
Yeah, I don't know if I can go do that. I don't know if I, you know, having just even the time that I have in AMG products and a couple others in Super Trofeo with Lamborghini and Honda and touring car stuff. I don't even know if I have the, you know, will to, you know, give it my all. If somebody said, "Hey, let's go IndyCar racing. Let's go start off with the 500 and try and qualify." I think that's a task in its own. I think like the Indianapolis in its own is
what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, I mean, what else could go wrong? I mean, I think that like that track in particular derives like a lot of different type of respect than any other oval probably out there, and I think there's a lot of pressure. But there's one thing that I do know is that Pippa is good under pressure. So she and I are kind of different people, and so I've had the opportunity of getting to know her really well, and I've seen her in her day-to-day, and so on the business end as well as the driving end, I think that people don't give her enough credit, maybe because she's not, you know, the front-running, like, star driver like a lot of other people are in IndyCar that are more regulars, I guess. She's not quite as regular as she wants to be, but the girl works really hard, and like the fact that she always ties herself she's always associated with a greater cause than like just her immediate career.
Sure.
Like it was Susan G. Komen, it's Donate Life.
Now it's Donate Life, right?
All these shameless plugs for Pippa. It's really great, and she really means. I don't want to say she means well. Like there's a bigger picture for her, and she gets it. And I think that's what you need to be successful in this industry.
Right. And we got a couple other people tuning in. Thomas Malin, Nick Kerr. Thank you guys for tuning in. Tommy, you were about to say something?
I was just going to say, there's 2 different races. You know, you've got everyone who's with the top teams or having a shot for the pole. I think people not making the race, Penske loading up all 3 cars and going home, like, was at 95, is, you know, and just stuff that happens that doesn't happen anywhere else, and it just you can't make it right. So expanding it to 36, I get the urge, but the reason it matters is because you get sent home if you don't do it on that day. Now, if Will Power has a shot at the pole and doesn't get the pole, his life doesn't change. Whereas the battle at the back of the grid I mean, these people haven't driven since last year there. They've worked their whole year, they've cobbled stuff together, and so, I mean, that's the one that is really, not life or death, but career life or death. You know?
Right, and that's kind of the argument for starting 35, 36 cars, you know, and part of the reason why Hinch didn't want to buy out a ride is because he knows the Jay Howards and, you know, these the mellow.
Serbia was a name I heard that was his seat maybe was in play.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they and part of the series argument is that, well, maybe we need to change tradition. Maybe it's time to evolve with the times. And the series is finally starting to show some growth, and we need that money.
I think that
well, I'm just telling you that's kind of the argument that they're making.
Is that if they make a decision to change it to 36 or whatever the number is, that needs to be announced at Performance Racing Industry. You know what I mean? It needs to be.
It
It's
can't
not
be
a
knee-jerk reaction to what's
exactly.
happening. For sure.
And it's really unfortunate, and I'm gutted for both of those two drivers. But at the same time, it's kind of like the nature of that particular race, and I think that's what provides a lot of hype. And I think that also, I don't want people I certainly don't. I'm not disappointed to the point where I'm not going to support those two drivers. If anything, I'm going to support those two drivers more.
Right. That's a really good point as well. It's kind of that boomerang effect.
To Tony's point, he's like the race within the race. A lot of people within or outside of the industry don't know the guys that if you qualify 30th at Indy or 32nd or 33rd, the guy that qualifies 33rd generally is trying the hardest to get in the field. He's putting the most effort in. He qualifies 33rd because he has to do the most to muscle that car into the field. And I think bump day, that's super exciting stuff. I mean. So Hinchcliffe doesn't make the field. I got to tell you something. He probably drove the hardest. He probably put the most effort in and did as much as he possibly could to get that car on the field. And they should make the show. And the same with Pippa Mann. And to Shea's point, Pippa drives karts. She drives cars quite a lot. But the 500's her big show, and to be that close. And if you look at her teammate who barely made the show, they were struggling. That means they were driving their tails off to try to make it in the field for 4 laps. And
absolutely,
that's exciting in and of itself.
Should we expand the medals at the Olympics to 5 or 6 different medals?
Right.
Maybe.
I actually agree with you, and I think the question is really answered based on Hinch's reaction to all of this. He has the right attitude. He doesn't want this. He accepts the unfortunate circumstance of bad luck. Things didn't go his way, and look, there's a lot of money that gets invested, a lot of people that back him and everybody else there, and I'm sure he's very sorry for the folks that do this, but help him out. But he's a racer. He's a true racer, and accepting the consequences of the bad luck. I think that's the answer in itself. To your point, I don't think we should be expanding anything for anyone.
I agree.
Think, if he was in. And somebody else was out, I don't think he'd be jumping up and down and changing his tune.
To that point, and as my wife has said a couple times, bump day is part of the draw, which it is. But at the same time, and we may get to this, but if we had 38, 40 entries and there were several cars bumped, this would be a non-story.
Yep.
This wouldn't even be a discussion. So it kind of is what it is, and I think the consensus around the table is that it is what it is. It's
as much as I feel for him, I'm glad we have bumping again.
I'd like to see him go back to the old format, though. Pole day and bump day.
I like the old format a lot better.
I agree. Yeah, it needs to be pole day, bump day separately. I mean, if you really wanted to go old school, then you go back to 2 weekends.
2 weekends.
Yes.
I looked forward to 3 weekends in May when I was younger.
When I was a kid growing up. Hey, Reinhold, sorry to pull you off of your scheduling there for your international trips, but my friend Al Longton
get me a car in Hong Kong tomorrow.
He wants to know what you think of Robert Wickens, and do you think his DTM experience made him that fast in Indy cars?
Honestly, I have to say I'm not so deep into this IndyCar racing. Unfortunately, it's not so popular in Europe.
But you must know
Robert
Wickens.
I know Wickens, of course, from the Mercedes-Benz DTM team. He's a pretty fast guy. And when you are in the school of a factory team like Mercedes-Benz in a pro league like the DTM, first of all, you must be fast, and second, you get everything to get even faster. And the step, he is a Formula guy actually. He came from Formula. That's the reason he moved then to DTM, because the career to the Formula 1 was not there. So he knows how to drive Formula cars, Formula 3 and so on. IndyCar, of course, is another level, and but he's pretty fast. He knows how to drive. He has all the good stuff from a factory team. So I guess that's the reason he's pretty talented. So he's pretty good, but I cannot judge how he proceeds in such a field. I have unfortunately no idea.
So, for those of you 7th Gear fans that tuned in to this Indy 500 preview show last year, Reinhold was kind enough to join us, and at that point, the big storyline for the month of May was Fernando Alonso coming over and running the papaya orange McLaren colored colors for the Andretti team. So, do you think at some point we're going to see Alonso come back and run Indy? Obviously not this year, but in the future, you think?
I guess Fernando Alonso is a really cool guy. I met him by the Daytona 24-hour. He was partner with the motorhomes actually. It was it's a really cool guy. I know him pretty good actually. He's an outstanding Formula One driver. I'm a big fan of him since he came into as the youngest guy in the Formula One and won directly races. He's really, really super good. Now with the McLaren thing, he's on the way to get better. He's, I guess, number 8 now in the Formula One championship on this McLaren, so it's a tendency to get up. But I figured out he find out also doing something else in his life instead of Formula One. So that was the reason doing this Daytona 24. He's now also in this WEC racing a little bit. Mm-hmm. So he's testing out and trying out different kind of stuff. I guess he really enjoyed Indy last year, and so far I know he was pretty good actually for first time being there, and I'm definitely sure when he gets a chance and a good cockpit, he will definitely come back, I guess.
Would you race in Indy, Rene? 230? What do you think? 230 miles? Huh?
Into turn one?
It's crazy. We talked about I never did an oval race. Daytona is just the oval, but then you have the bus stop and it's not an oval race. So I really like to do something like this, but definitely not starting in the Indy car.
Maybe a NASCAR race for you, right?
Something lower category to get used to, but of course it's pretty cool.
I think Reinhold would like to go up against the likes of Jimmy Johnson. Right?
Yeah, Martin Truex.
Randy
Walls. Yeah, exactly.
Can we tell Randy Walls' story?
Yeah.
You can talk about it, of course.
Now,
all right, TK.
Obviously,
since you opened the door,
Rene is Mr. AMG, but he's been racing for a long time, and he didn't have any opportunities in an AMG, so he was running with Manthey Porsche, but he wasn't sure that was a great idea given his position with AMG, so they came up with an alias, and he raced under an alias. I looked when I was calling the TV at Daytona this year. I said, "Oh, it's Rene in the 59." No, he's not in the 59 car. And so after the RDC dinner, I'm at the Hilton Steakhouse with Paul Tracy. He said, "I need a glass of Camus," so we went to the Hilton and got a glass of Camus. And Rene walks by. I said, "Rene, what are you doing here?" He says, "Oh, I'm entered under a different name, Randy Walls." And I was looking forward to blowing his cover if he made it to Victory Lane. I was going to say, that I know Randy Walls, and that is not Randy Walls.
Do you have Randy Walls on your driver's suit? Does it say Randy Walls on your driver's suit?
I had, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm back in the
Really?
AMG car.
Okay.
That's classic. That is a great
So
story.
who came up with that name for you?
AJ.
Of course he did. AJ came up with that name. AJ.
I don't like to know who Randy Walls really is.
But I
Maybe
remember.
he's the, I don't know.
I remember the story behind how he came up with that, and it's definitely got a big NASCAR flair to it, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
I
well,
googled it and I saw some old track racing guy.
Well, AJ played a little bit of a trick on you.
You think?
Like usual.
Because the name,
I know, right?
Because the name Randy has a different connotation in English.
That's right.
right.
Yeah.
There's the name Randy, and there's the adjective Randy.
Do you feel Randy?
But let's go for the name Randy, okay?
Actually, I can't believe AJ came up with a name that was even that
Clever?
well. maybe, right? Almost too clever.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
You didn't think AJ had a double entendre in him?
I thought AJ had a little more obvious double entendre in him. Yeah.
Subtle as a sledgehammer.
Yes.
But to be honest, I double checked this, of course, with some of my other friends from the US.
Well,
and they said it's okay.
And apparently, according to Al Longton, he's claiming, and I don't know how true this is, but he's claiming that there was a Randy Walls that drove sprint cars at Eldora.
I'm sure there was. Yeah, I'm sure.
Why wouldn't
There's probably
there be?
like 30 Randy Walls.
Right, why wouldn't there be?
A lot of dirt tracks in the
Of course they would. Why not?
It's like Thomas Schmidt in Germany, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. The Schlitterbahn. Something like
So
that.
if I
There
go
was a
race
rusty
in
ball.
Germany, do I have to be called Thomas Schmidt?
It depends.
Just so I blend in?
Depends for which brand you drive.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah.
Have you ever heard of the famous, legendary American short track racer named Dick Trickle?
Oh, yeah.
I heard the name, but yeah.
He was the favorite of all the ESPN announcers. There was this one, they would announce the winner of the race. They say, Jeff Gordon outdueled Rusty Wallace at Darlington today. Dick Trickle finished 23rd.
Always.
Always,
Trickle.
every night, every Sunday night.
You always knew where Dick.
Yep, from my home state, good old Dick Trickle.
Now, rest in peace, Dick Trickle, who was one of the IROC test drivers. But he was supposedly won 3,000 short track races through the Midwest.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Fed his family, built
Yeah.
homes and had stuff all from just racing 3-4 nights a week.
Yeah,
He's a
Wisconsin
really amazing
Rapids.
guy.
Was a
Yeah,
rookie.
slinger.
He was a rookie at like 48 or something
Yeah.
in NASCAR.
Yeah.
He was a rookie at 48. Yeah, drove into his 50s in NASCAR. Total character.
Had the guys wire up a cigarette lighter in his car.
Oh yeah.
Come on.
Yes.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Cigarette lighter in the car during yellow
He could
flags.
smoke during cautions.
Yeah.
He would
True
sit.
story.
He drank coffee all day. Like in IROC, he'd set the thing down. He'd come back an hour later, pick up the same cup.
Loved racing. Loved the
Loved it.
whole camaraderie of it.
Yeah.
And so anytime, any of those nights, there would be beer out after they'd get the race car loaded and everybody's hanging around the back of the hauler. It would get later and later, and they would say, "Geez, Dick, don't you have to race tomorrow?" And his quote was, "I need an hour's sleep for every 100 laps."
That's
So
exactly
whatever-
right.
That's right. I need an hour's sleep for every 100 laps. But really a great driver. In my instruction, often quote him that there's 1,000 positions in that gas pedal. Great Dick Trickle quote. Rest in peace.
See, Dick Trickle even makes his way to the AMG Mercedes Driving Academy. So, Tommy, you just asked Rene about, would he ever want to race Indy? And so you've had an amazing, stellar Hall of Fame career. Had the opportunity ever crossed your professional path at some point for you to maybe think about getting into an Indy car for the 500?
I mean, that was always the goal. That's what I was shooting for. And my height worked against me somewhat.
Are you taller or shorter than Chris Neifel?
I'm not as tall as Neifel. Neifel is taller than I am. So
there was hope.
There was hope. I tested Gallus Crayco car in 1990 through Chevy, and I was pretty close. I think if I hadn't been hurt in 91, I think there was a decent chance I would have done a race or two the next year in kart, and so who knows what would have happened. But the funny thing is, when I first went to Indy for the first time, I wasn't in the GTP car yet. It was early in my career. I was racing GTU, but I was trying to get to Indy cars. And I remember I went to the 500. I told Rene the other day, I said, "You've got to go." Every other race I've ever watched, I was just focused on the action going into turn one, the jockeying for position. I was so overwhelmed by the noise and the people screaming. The hair stands up on your arms, and I didn't even watch the turn one even. I was just overwhelmed, and the overwhelming thought of seeing those guys going by is like, there are people in those missiles, and I don't know if I want to do that. Yeah. I want to do it in the worst way, but I'm also, and I think that's part of the appeal there, is it's terrifying. You hear people like Nelson Piquet and these people come, and you hear Formula One guys say, "I would never go there." Schumacher said, "Never. That's insane. I'm not doing it." So it's a special race. There's nothing like it.
And strangely enough, you think of it as so massive, because obviously the complex is massive and so on, but you go stand on that front straightaway, and it's not nearly as wide as you think it is.
And our old buddy Pete Stoltz is watching.
Hey, Pete.
Hey, Pete.
So, all right. So, obviously, Indy's a huge deal. We talked about the tradition. I don't want to see the tradition go away. In fact, I think we're all in agreement. We'd like to see some of the traditions come back. But at the end of the day here, we got 500 miles to run on Sunday. And when they got through qualifying, the Fast 9 were pretty much the usual subjects, skewed by the Chevy teams. You had 4 Penske's, you had the 3 Carpenter cars, including Danica, and only 2 Hondas, Bourdais and Dixon. So I think I'd be surprised if Honda's holding something back at this point, given qualifying. But what do you, without having a starting grid in front of us, let's get some takes on favorite choices to win on Sunday coming up here. Shea, how about you?
I think Bourdais should never be underestimated. That's for sure. I think Bourdais has obviously a really solid shot at running up front, moving through the pack. Where did Bourdais qualify? Do you know? Fourth?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought he was in the top 5. So I think he should not be underestimated. I think they probably, I mean, just based on history, they've got a really great strategy. He's been a favorite to kind of lead and then move back and then come back to lead again and win a race. This is, I don't mean for this to be cliche, but I'm super stoked about Danica, because the reason being is she spent 6, 7, 8 years or whatever it is out of an Indy car.
7, I think.
And came, right, yeah, Danica 7 or whatever they're calling it. I'm really stoked about her performance, because I think that, honestly, I think she's really excited to be back. And I think it shows, and I think her stamina is obviously there. She's with a great team, she's got a great car, she's got all the great things, you know, working for her. She's back in her green livery. I don't think she should be underestimated either, being that the fact that she's
She will be.
packed.
She will be underestimated.
She will be. She'll be discounted, partially I think because of the team, because the team.
Oh, possibly.
People just love to hate on
But
Danica.
then again,
People love to hate on
but then
Danica.
again, like Ed, like we were just talking, like we were working, and then we came home in the rental car, and I'm watching it live. I'm like, oh, somebody had pole, and I looked, like, literally 30 seconds later on Twitter, I scrolled the IndyCar feed, and I'm like, Carpenter just got pole, and we're like, what? Carpenter just got pole? Like, how all of a sudden did that just happen? So, I mean, I don't think you should 100% underestimate the team.
No way.
But, you know, I think that she's going to have I hope she has a really good running. And the fact that she's been pack racing for 7 years, I think might have a good play. And I wish the best for her. But I do really like.
I'll build on that with Danica.
And before you get into that answer, Tommy, just Brian Lima's tuned in, so our friend Brian Lima's paying attention. So thanks for tuning in, Brian. We appreciate that. Stoltz says hi, great to see you guys. So just want to make sure we got you guys acknowledged. Shout outs to you guys. So thank you very much for tuning in. So all right, sorry, Tommy, go ahead, add to that.
Danica has 6 top 10s in the Indy 500. It's far and away her best track if you got to pick one. So, and there's just her nature. She's always cautious, but when she has a car that, like some of those years at Texas, some of those places, when she's feeling racy, she's pretty conservative early, and then as the race goes on, if the car's good, she gets more and more aggressive when she needs to be. I mean, that's the perfect way to race Indy. I mean, I think the intensity of the pack racing, if you will, at Indy has kind of gone up since she was there, but it was pretty intense when she left. So I think she's got a better than decent shot. I'd call her a dark horse, you know, first time back in IndyCar. I think Elio is kind of a sleeper. If you watched last year's, Elio had a lot of misfortune last year, but still was in with a shot right at the end.
Well, he got lucky getting
about a guy
away
who knows how to run the race.
Dixon deal.
Elio's
a little bit like fortunately he's had Rick Mears to learn from for all these years, so I see a lot of similarities there. Al Longton, you're killing me, Al. Question for all: what will go wrong with Marco this race? And I could do a whole show on that by myself.
What happened? He was super quick initially, right? And then I don't even know
Marco. He was fastest on Fast Friday when they were allowed to turn up the boost, and he was running in a draft. That's why he was the fastest.
Well, they'll be drafting on Sunday.
But they won't have the extra horsepower that they were allowed to turn up.
Sunday. So he's actually pretty racy at Indy. That's probably arguably Marco's best track as well. So
but he
We're
always...
gonna have a best track. That's
Yeah,
a
that's
good best
a good
track.
one. That's not a bad one. All right, so you're going with Danica. Tommy, you going with Danica?
I mean, if I had to pick,
Or Elio?
if I had to pick, put money down, I would probably put money down first on Elio. Of the regulars, I think Newgarden's just is good and getting better still.
Yeah.
And then I would say Danica for my dark horse.
Nice.
And then my heart is with my man, Big O, Oriole Survey.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, Michael, we're up to you, man. What's your take? What's your call on who do you think's going to win?
Following that Danica train, I remember her in the Reinhold car qualifying. It was loose as all get out.
Yeah.
Remember, was it turn 1 or turn 2?
Turn 1.
She was opposite lock, through the corner, pulled it off, and still qualified front.
Still qualified, I think, fourth.
Fourth.
And wanted to pull the car on the line. Not, oh, thank God I saved it and didn't wreck, and I'm fourth for my rookie 500. She won. I've known Danica for a long time. I said,
Impressive. There's going to be a lot of hype around that, and that's going to be an exciting story to watch.
Yeah.
I think my heart goes out selfishly. I got a couple boys in there. Spencer qualified really well.
Yeah.
Spencer Piggott.
One of our buds.
P6.
I mean, wow. And then a kid that I've been working with for a long, long time, Kyle Kaiser. It's his third race, and he qualified, I think it's 17th. So that's going to be pretty exciting to watch. Favorites to win, I have a hard spot for Oriole, but I got to tell you, watching Dixon whip the wheel day in and day out, whether it's a road course or an oval, is one of the more exciting things I've seen since going to an F1 race live. So I guess if I had to pick, Danica's going to be in the mix. I'm not going to go for her for a favorite, I don't think. I want to put Dixon in there and Neves. Was that your? Yeah, I mean, he can engineer that race so well. So I'm going Dixon first, Neves second, and then I'm going to go Piggott. I'm going Piggott.
Stoltz just chimed in. He says he's going with Piggott too.
So, and I have to leave you guys. Thank you for inviting me. And I promise to stir the pot more with F1 next time by watching even more F1 races. So thank you.
Awesome. Michael, thank you so much for being a part of the 7th Gear Show tonight. I really appreciate it, and I know everybody else does. You had great insights, and we really appreciate it. My buddy Ryan Hampton, for those of you that know Ryan Hampton, he's tuned in now. So, Michael, thank you very much. Go get some chow. We'll see you soon. All right. Working our way back over into the darkness here.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Nipper, what's your take?
Well, there's been some good answers, but to keep it moving along, I would like to. I think Ed Carpenter's got something going. He's over the years improved his trade there. Over and gotten to be, I think, really one of the top oval drivers. So I think that if you don't include, the ones that have been picked, I would say I think Ed's got a good chance, a lot of experience.
Fair enough answer. Fair enough answer. All right, Rene.
So as always, when talking about racing, there's two ways to go. You go with your head or you go with your heart. If I'm going to go with my head, there's a lot of guys that really have a good shot at it, like Newgarden, who's just a stellar talent, and Wickens, I think, has got a chance. He's a fast kid, but my heart goes with the people that I know and love. Oriole Servia, the best to you, and I'm sorry Hinch isn't in the show, fellow Canadian, but and Bourdais with Jimmy Vasser as the strategist. He's got a very, very good shot at it. So best of luck to everybody out there. But those three sort of have my go get 'em attitude.
All right, Reinhold, I know this is not necessarily part of your
Pick a name
wheelhouse.
out of a hat.
I should have printed out the starting lineup for you.
Who's
Favorite
gonna
to win the Indy
500?
500.
pick the winner at Monaco.
Yeah, let's do that.
That's a fair question. Who do you think's going to win Monaco this
That's
weekend?
a better question, yeah.
Let's do that. That's a fair question.
Because I'm too less into Indy to have a serious answer for this, to be honest. Formula One, Monaco is always completely different story. It's not just the pure car performance there. This is it's 3.35 kilometers long. This track, it's super tricky, super different. I guess like you talked about Indy in the IndyCar world, it's I guess Monaco in the Formula One world. It's completely different rules. The pole position is super important there. Usually the pole man wins also, or very often at least. And not just the strongest car will be the best. So it's definitely a driver track, and it's hard to say. So I can imagine that guys like Vettel could be pretty in front there. Hamilton, of course, also is a little bit depends, but Vettel was always strong in Monaco. So that's maybe my favorite, my pick. Yeah.
All right.
But I have to say, also Bottas was in the last race is super fast. Just
Bottas
unlucky in the last Formula One race.
Yeah.
Actually, he won. He could win. So Bottas or Vettel, let me say.
All right.
Well,
And my good friend Liz Lowy is tuned in. So, Liz, thank you very much. I can't believe we have already gone an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And we could very easily keep going because we could get into a whole.
I have one more
bunch of
question
things.
for Rene.
Yes.
If you had to put money on one person to be for the fastest in the rain at the Nordschleife of all the current sports car guys, who if you had to put money on one person for one lap, like to win a race, last lap battle.
So I guess one of the fastest guy for me right now on the Nordschleife in a GT3 car could be Mauro Engel. Mauro is super pretty fast. He has the attitude doing stuff, and that's my pick.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, guys, like I said, we've gone for an hour and a half here on the 7th Gear Show. My pick to win the 500. My wife is pinning me down. I thought I could skate out of this one. I gotta say, I think, you know, as much as we like to root for the underdog, and I would love to see Oriol have that success, he's been, you know, right there for a long time, but I think it's going to wind up coming back to the usual suspects. And I got a feeling I don't think Elio's going to get his fourth. I think it's going to be Newgarden. I think it's going to be Penske, just they've got so many resources. My dark horse, which is not such a dark horse, I think is kind of Ed Carpenter. Just because I feel like for as good as he is at Indy, he just hasn't had that same success elsewhere, and I feel like he's kind of getting a little bit of that sort of reputation that Scotty Brayton had when he was around. He was always fast at Indy. He was always, you know, multi-time pole winner, but just could never quite convert in the race. So Al Longton says he thinks it's going to be Rossi in a repeat, which could happen. That could happen. That's why they run the race, right? You got to watch to find out. So, all right, guys, we're going to wrap this up. Otherwise, I could sit out here all night long, and my phone would probably run dead, and these guys are going to starve to death and walk off on me anyway. So I'm just going to say very quickly, thank you very, very much to our guest tonight, Mr. Tommy Kendall. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Nipper Alsup,
Great to be here.
Mr. Rene Villenueve, Reinhold Reinger, Todd Snyder, Shea, Holbrook. We couldn't have asked for a better Indy 500 in Monaco preview show. I hope to have you guys back soon. This was phenomenal. Like I said, we could go for hours on end with this. But now, gang, 7th Gear Nation, let me kind of readjust myself here as it's getting dark here in Brazelton, Georgia. James, thanks for listening in. I appreciate you guys tuning in for the show. Tune back in. Great guest list. Thank you, Al. And thanks for your kind words. Guys, I want you to make sure you tune in for the next 7th Gear show, which is actually going to take place this Saturday night, the night before the 500, from a 500 all-night race party kind of deal. So we're going to talk more racing from the world capital of motorsports, Indianapolis, Indiana. And by all means, make sure that you realize and support our good friends at BeNonHuman.com for all your lifestyle and apparel needs. Yes, Emmerich, that's correct. I am here for the Road Atlanta AMG program. But again, click on the Kraus tab on the BeNonHuman.com website, again, for all your lifestyle and apparel needs, and you can get down to the Kraus collection of T-shirts and so forth there. Please support those guys. They've been really good to me and good to the show. So once again, thanks very much to Mr. Tommy Kendall, Nipper Alsup, Rene Villenueve, Todd Snyder, Reinhold Reinger, Shea Holbrook, and until Saturday night, roughly about the 7:30 p.m. we'll get back at it and we'll talk more Indy 500 in Monaco. So until then, thanks very much. See you guys.